The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking, and she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. And then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of the Lord called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt.
This will probably be quite a short reflection this morning. There's just one thing out of this story from Abraham and Sarah's life that has impressed itself upon me as I've reflected upon this passage from the lectionary once again. But first, let me give a bit of background. Sometime before this story, Abraham and Sarah had begun to despair at the likelihood that they would have children, despite the promise God had made to them. They were getting older. Sarah began to think too old, and still there were no children. So Sarah tells Abraham to sleep with her slave Hagar so that he could maybe get a son that way. Abraham's not recorded as resisting the idea, he simply does it. And of course, Hagar got pregnant and her son Ishmael was born. Once Hagar became pregnant, Sarah became jealous and her relationship with Hagar deteriorated. Well, some time passes and God again promises that Abraham and Sarah will have a child, at which Sarah laughs, as they're now quite old. But the day comes and Isaac is born, and we get to the story that we've read. There's a party to celebrate Isaac's weaning, perhaps an expression of hope that it looks like he's survived early childhood and can now reasonably be expected to live to inherit from Abraham. Isaac and Ishmael are playing together, and Ishmael mocks Isaac, maybe a bit disgruntled that his expectations of inheriting from Abraham have now disappeared, maybe just normal children's play. Sarah's jealousy resurfaces and she demands that Abraham get rid of Hagar and her son, the son who came as a result of Sarah engineering Abraham sleeping with Hagar. Abraham saddened because he cares for both of his sons. And God tells Abraham not to be distressed, that he, God, will take care of Ishmael. And that's what's challenged me. Abraham, even if it was at Sarah's suggestion, took matters into his own hands, wavering in his trust of God and God's promises, and slept with Hagar, and a son was born. Eventually, God honors the promise to Abraham and to Sarah, and they do have a son, as it was meant to be. But God hadn't dismissed the consequences of Abraham's actions with Hagar. I think we often assume that God is more clinical and judgmental than this story indicates. Abraham's trust in God has wavered, and he took things into his own hands when Sarah seemed unable to have a child. And there were consequences. The tension between Isaac and Ishmael continued, even into future generations. But God cared for Ishmael, the result of Abraham's lack of faith. So I'm challenged about how easily we often dismiss the consequences of our less than ideal responses to or reliance upon God. It seems from this story that despite Abraham's weakness or lack of trust, God still worked with and through the resulting consequences, in this case, a child. God promises Abraham that Ishmael will become a nation too, because he was Abraham's offspring. Now, this is in no way to say, so do whatever you like and God will support you. If we were to have read the lectionary reading from Romans for today as well, from Romans chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 begins, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means, says Paul. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? So I'm not seeing in this story about Abraham permission for anything goes, but rather a recognition that despite Abraham's wavering in his trust of God on occasions, God nevertheless often continues to honor him and even the consequences of his actions. So the message to me, not permission for anything goes, but a reminder that self-flagellation, constantly berating ourselves, self-condemnation, may be presuming to put ourselves above and even to being more critical than God sometimes is of the consequences of our actions. So we become even more judgmental of ourselves than God is of us. God continues to work in and through even the things that we might see as mistakes, as errors, and which may actually be so. But God transforms those things into something else, working with us as whole beings, not just the best bits of us. God loves us just as we are, warts and all, accepts us just as we are, works through the positive and even sometimes the negative things we do, rather than just dismissing them and berating us for them. And even as he does so, he continues to work within us to transform us. And there are times when those transformations come not through the good things, but through the things that teach us via our mistakes, our lack of trust, our uncertainty about God's faithfulness. But God remains faithful, and through that transforms us as he transformed Abraham, who did become the father of great nations. May God's Spirit surround you and those whom you love. Rest now in that calm embrace. Let your hearts be warmed and all storms be stilled by the whisper of his voice. Amen.